In the meantime, the foreign exchange market reforms carried out by the Central Bank of Nigeria over the past year has been commended by economists and financial market professionals. Earlier today, a renowned Nigerian economist, Dr. Adedipe, presented facts behind his forecast on exchange rate, inflation, interest rate, and that's at the 2025 Economic Outlook Forum hosted by the Nigeria British Chamber of Commerce.
When it comes to interest rate, the new management of CBN came into office and said, we are going to move away from the mission drift that we observed in the previous management and focus primarily on the mandate of a central or reserve bank, and that is inflation targeting. And so looking at inflation, like our president said earlier on, at 34.8% end of the year, by the beginning of 2024, we were above 20%, okay? So the CBN management came here and said inflation targeting, and then they began from February 2024 to raise the monetary policy rate. In all, throughout 2024, there was 850 basis points increase in MPR. The argument was fight inflation. But we also mentioned to them that data that we interrogated from 1960 till date shows clearly that movements in the official, that is monetary policy rate, and movements in inflation rate have only co-varied to the extent of 37%. Which means inflation in Nigeria is not fully explained by changes in interest rates. So it is basically structural, but largely also driven by food inflation. So and then we said, if Nigeria is going to break the back of inflation, then we need to focus on food security. It has 4 items, but especially the first 2, availability of food and then affordability of food. Those are the first 2 elements of food security. So if we focus on that, then we can deal with inflation, because food inflation will subside and that will feed into the headline inflation. But how do we do that in an environment where 60% of harvest goes to loss? That's the estimate of post-harvest losses in Nigeria, about 60%. So that means we need to either create an environment for private capital to come into processing and storage, and then logistics. But of course, like President said earlier, security is also important, which we warned the government about in 2017. That if we did not address the issue of the herders and farmers clash, as the government then called it, that we are playing with food inflation, which of course is our reality today. Because I made it very simple. I said, look, those fellows should be labeled as terrorists. And the simple way it interprets is this: a terrorist is anyone that makes you afraid to go to where you normally work and get your means of livelihood. So whoever makes you afraid to go there and do your normal, business is a terrorist. I said, so if we look at it from that perspective, then the full weight of dealing with terrorists will be applied to those headers. But of course, he said, no, it's headers farmers class. Okay, fine. But my warning then, January 2017, is that in a matter of 5 years, Nigeria will be dealing with food inflation that we had never seen before. And that's our reality today. So we'll deal with that. Then happily also, one of the areas this current government is working on, we have made noise about it for years, that Nigeria should also transit from rain-fed farming to year-round farming. That means irrigation. Irrigation in Nigeria historically was on the back of the river basin authorities, which have now been revived by this government. So and we said, yes, they are going in the right direction. That means they are listening. They've also accepted that they are not experts. Because the problem with experts is that experts believe they know it all. So they listen to their teachers and other people to become experts. Now, once they become experts, they don't want to listen to anybody again. All right? So what we do is not to keep quiet about that. So now, NPR at 27.5% end of the year. You know what that did? It made Naira assets attractive to investors, local and foreign. So that drove FPIs. So what we see therefore in our external reserves that we closed the year with at $42 billion was likely driven by the NPR that went up. If you dimension the inflows in capital importation, you see that largely it's accounted for by investments in treasury bills, investments in FGM bonds, and of course, than the stock market, all right? Our stock market also has done fantastically well. If you look at, in fact, the way I put it is this, that we should also look at that sector for opportunities to create wealth. And why is that so? When you look at that market in the last 3 years, the return on that market, that is year-to-date return to the end of the year, had always been greater than the rate of inflation. Even at 34.8, we closed 2024 with. The year-to-date return was 37.45% thereabout. And that was higher than the rate of inflation.